If you're a fan of historical nonfiction and the high seas life of the 18th and 19th century, then today's book just might be for you. Today I will be covering The Wager by David Grann. Welcome to Spencer Reads Everything. I'm your host, Spencer Duncan, and today I am covering a book that was recommended to me by my friend Trevor. He himself is a fan of nonfiction books, although he would say that they don't take up quite as many as fantasy on his reading list. And so this was one that he found interesting, and I thought that I would give it a read. I found this to be a very interesting book as well. I found it particularly engaging because it deals with a moment in history in which we have given a lot of glorification, and a lot of our pop culture, it still engages with the high seas, whether it's the piracy, the age of exploration, or in this case trying to capture a Spanish galleon, and what the impact of it was. So let me read to you a synopsis from Goodreads. I feel like these are probably the most succinct way that I can read it that does not give too much away, although as a historical event there's not too terribly much that I'm afraid of giving away in terms of any kind of twists or big reveals. Goodreads says, on January 28, 1742, a ramshackle vessel of patched together wood and cloth washed up on the coast of Brazil. Inside were 30 emaciated men, barely alive, and they had an extraordinary tale to tell. They were survivors of His Majesty's ship, the Wager, a British vessel that had left England in 1740 on a secret mission during an imperial war with Spain. While the Wager had been chasing a Spanish treasure-filled galleon known as the Prize of All the Oceans, it had wrecked on a desolate island off the coast of Patagonia. The men, after being marooned for months and facing starvation, built the flimsy craft and sailed for more than 100 days, traversing nearly 3,000 miles of storm-racked seas. They were greeted as heroes. But then, 6 months later, another, even more decrepit craft landed on the coast of Chile. This boat contained just 3 castaways, and they told a very different story. The 30 sailors who landed in Brazil were not heroes, they were mutineers. The first group responded with countercharges of their own of a tyrannical and murderous senior officer and his henchmen. It became clear that while stranded on the island, the crew had fallen into anarchy, with warring factions fighting for dominion over the barren wilderness. As accusations of treachery and murder flew, the Admiralty convened a court-martial to determine who was telling the truth. The stakes were life and death for whomever the court found guilty could hang. The Wager is a grand tale of human behavior at the extremes, told by one of our greatest nonfiction writers. Grann's recreation of the hidden world on a British warship rivals the work of Patrick O'Brian. His portrayal of the castaways' desperate straits stands up to the classics of survival writing such as The Endurance, and his account of the court-martial has the savvy of a Scott Turow thriller. As always with Grann's work, the incredible twists of the narrative hold the reader spellbound. If you're not familiar with Daniel Grann, of course, his other big book that is in the news in the last couple years is Killers of the Flower Moon, but he's also written The Lost City of Z. So definitely a well-known name when it comes to writing these engaging nonfictions that, picks up on an event and shows you just how fascinating and complicated it can be. I would say The Wager definitely falls into that camp. Some things of note is, I will admit that I do think at times it's a little harder to follow than some of his other work. I think his commitment to using primary sources made it a little bit of a challenge to read sometimes, not because I don't believe in using primary sources. On the contrary, I'm a huge fan of using primary sources as a historian myself, but I do think at times it made it a little harder to fully appreciate where you were in the storyline. I do think that he did at times need to give a little more context to make things just a little clearer. I wouldn't say it's too terribly long of a read. It certainly has enough material in there to be engaging, but I will say that I think that this could be a challenge for some people that don't have a decent appreciation already for this time period. And I would certainly say that there are going to be real challenges for anyone that don't have any interest in the high seas or the questions of mutiny. There have been quite a few things that have already been written in that regard. Of course, the most famous one being Mutiny on the HMS Bounty. You can find other historical works of that nature. So who would I say this is for? Well, it's certainly someone that has an appreciation for that time period and is going to be interested in the court drama aspect of it, and not so much in what actually happened on the seas, because we just don't have much more information behind what is being said during the court cases. Who wouldn't I say this is for? Well, People that don't like nonfiction or historical nonfiction, especially if you feel like you have to do a fair amount of research to better understand it. But if you are someone that is willing to engage with that, then this is absolutely going to be a book for you. But of course, please let me know what you think about this book if you've read it, or what you think about this book in comparison to all of his other books. Don't forget to like, subscribe, turn on those notifications, and until next time, keep those pages turning.